This video has been prepared for people who have attended a basic Halliwick course. The aim is to serve as a reminder of some of the main supports and should be used in conjunction with the basic course handbook. For demonstration purposes, swimmers are sometimes given more support than they actually need. First of all, let's look at how we teach swimmers to enter the pool. There are 5 stages of forward entries that may be used. Full support, elbow support, hand support, independent entry. Support for swimmers with poor head control. With all supports, the instructor selects a depth of water in which he or she is balanced and which will be a safe depth for the swimmer. Let's look at the forward entries in more detail. As seen here, when using the full support, the instructor gives verbal and visual support to the swimmer. The instructor reminds the swimmer to blow. It is also important to remember to adopt the correct stance, with one foot in front of the other, before guiding a swimmer into the water. When working in the water, it is important to encourage the swimmers to blow, as demonstrated here, whilst using an elbow entry. Once a swimmer reaches the stage of using the hand support, he or she should not need to be reminded to blow. As with all supports, the instructor and swimmer should keep their hands as flat as possible. Although a swimmer may be able to enter the water independently, they may require support while on the pool side, and again once they're in the water. The instructor here is demonstrating a support for a swimmer with very poor head control. Note that as soon as the swimmer enters the water, the support changes. All these supports may be adapted to meet the individual needs of a swimmer. Help may also be required on the pool side for a swimmer with poor sitting balance. The combined rotational entry is an alternative method of entry into the pool. This should be demonstrated to the swimmer before teaching it. The instructor stands to one side of the swimmer with her back against the pool wall. The instructor offers support with her right hand to the swimmer's right upper arm. The swimmer looks at the instructor to create a rotation as she comes forward into the water. The instructor can help with the learning of this by saying, "Look at me." As the swimmer meets the water, the instructor changes to the appropriate support. In this situation, a back float position. The instructor needs to practice the support for a combined rotational entry from both sides. As well as learning how to enter the pool, the swimmers also need to be taught how to get out. The most commonly used exit is the wriggle exit. It's important to guide the swimmer and not lift her. The exit can be made easier for the swimmer if the legs are supported parallel to the surface of the water. A lateral lift exit may be used for a swimmer who is unable to use the wriggle exit, and when a hoist is not available or is unsuitable, or in emergencies. It's important that a risk assessment is made to ensure that this is the most suitable and safe exit for the swimmer. Practice away from the poolside is essential. Instructors should be as close as possible to the swimmer, arms outstretched, palms facing down, the weight taken on the upper arms. Counting 1 and 2 and 3 and lift ensures coordination of the movement. Ensure that the swimmer's arms are tucked in and take special care of head and heels. The transit seat is now used to help swivel the swimmer into a sitting position, ready to transfer into a shower chair. The same principles as those used for a lateral lift exit can be used for the lateral entry. One difference from the lateral lift exit is that the instructor's hands can be palm up. The swimmer is encouraged to initiate the entry by turning the head. The chair position should be adopted by both instructors and swimmers in the water. This is a stable position which allows balanced movement in the vertical. For both swimmers and instructors, shoulders are under the water, feet are flat and arms are forward. To teach this position, instructors often say, sit on a chair, arms on the table. Supports in the vertical can be from in front of the swimmer or from behind. Let's look at the supports with the instructor facing the swimmer. There are 4 facing supports that can be used. Full support, elbow support, hand support, or straddle. Here we can see the full support being demonstrated. The instructor supports at the trunk. This may be high on the trunk, though not under the armpits. But as the swimmer gains vertical balance control, the support should be lowered. Supporting at the center of balance, around the hips, allows the swimmer to take more control of the vertical balance. The elbow support can be varied. If the elbows are supported close to the swimmer's body, more support is being given. The swimmer will have to take more control of vertical balance when the elbows are supported away from the body. When using the hand support, it's important for the instructor to keep hands about 15 centimeters below the surface of the water, so as not to cause any unwanted rotations to the swimmer. The straddle position gives extra support to swimmers who have very poor or no head control. Note how the instructor supports at the nape of the neck and at the small of the back. There are 2 supports used when supporting from behind the swimmer. Support at the trunk and hand support. The instructor's hands can be higher on the trunk for more support, or lower to allow the swimmer to take more control of vertical balance. The instructor's hands should be about 15 centimeters below the surface of the water. Additional support can be given by the instructor's forearms if needed. Support for the back float. To achieve a back float position, the swimmer is asked to put shoulders back, let ears get wet, and let feet float up. The swimmer is supported at the center of balance, around the hip region. The support can be varied depending on the amount of support required by the swimmer. This might be the instructor using hands and forearms, hands only, or just fingertips. It's important to allow the water to support the head and not the helper's shoulder. A forward recovery is a movement from a back float position to the vertical. To perform a forward recovery, the swimmer needs to bring the head forward and reach forward with both arms. Bending the knees towards the chin will also help with this rotation. The swimmer should blow as the chin nears the water. The instructor should be behind the swimmer and must give time for the swimmer to initiate the rotation and allow the swimmer's shoulders to remain under the water. Lateral rotation can take place in the vertical or horizontal position. Here we see a lateral rotation in the vertical, and now in the horizontal. Let's have a look at these in more detail. Lateral rotation in the vertical can be practiced in many different ways. A starting point might be turning within the instructor's arms, as demonstrated here. With practice, this can lead to independent rotation. The initial activities for the lateral rotation in the horizontal can be carried out by using the back float support. The instructor is saying, "Look at me," to help the swimmer learn the correct movement. To progress to full lateral rotation, the instructor faces the swimmer and stands with shoulders out of the water, facing towards the swimmer's head. The instructor encourages the swimmer to turn his head and blow into the water. With improved control of lateral rotation and breathing, the swimmer will eventually be ready to complete a full lateral rotation. Initially, the swimmer should roll towards the instructor. Give time for the swimmer to initiate the roll, giving help if needed to complete the rotation. The instructor's hands stay in virtually the same position in the water, any required hand movement being very small. This support should be practiced from both sides. Combined rotation is a combination of vertical and lateral rotation. With support from behind, the swimmer moves forward and simultaneously rolls onto her back to achieve a safe breathing position. The instructor behind the swimmer says, "Look at me," as the swimmer falls forward to help the swimmer learn the correct movement. It's important to remind the swimmer to blow as the mouth nears the water. As well as being practiced between two instructors, the combined rotation can be taught with one instructor. The combined rotation is also used to bring a swimmer into the pool side. Group work can take place in a circle, a line, or file formation. The supports for circle and line work are the same. Here we see the short arm support being demonstrated. This support can be varied depending on the amount of balance control the swimmer has. The long arm support can be used with swimmers who have more balance control. It's important for the instructor to keep his or her hands about 15 centimeters below the surface of the water. This will ensure that the swimmer's balance is not disturbed. The hands may need to be angled for some activities. Working in a line requires an extra instructor at one end. The cross-arm support enables swimmers with poor head and trunk control, or with no arms, to join in circle and line work. The swimmer's position can be well controlled by the instructors. By using correct supports which allow the swimmer to learn about controlling their own balance, the instructor gives the swimmer the best opportunity to become as independent as possible in the water. These swimmers and instructors are demonstrating the file formation. A closed file is useful for a swimmer who has poor balance control or who can't hold on to the instructor in front. In an open file, the swimmer needs to have greater balance control. Changing formation is a link of coordinated changes between line, circle and file in any order which can help the swimming session flow more easily. The group here is changing from line to file, and then it moves round into a circle, adopting short and long arm supports as appropriate. It's important that the group leader coordinates the changes. These supports allow the swimmer to learn about controlling their own balance in the water. Planning based on the 10-point program from the Halliwick method and the use of group work will enhance learning, so aiding swimmers towards independence.
Physical exercise is important for all of us, regardless of age, ability or lifestyle. It encourages healthy development when we're young and helps us to keep fit and active throughout the rest of our lives. Physical activity is good for the heart and circulatory systems. It keeps muscles in good shape and it exercises the lungs. During exercise, we vary our rate of breathing automatically according to the amount of speed or effort required. If we become tired, we can always slow down or take a rest. And this applies not only in sport, but in all those everyday activities where physical effort is required. Periods of physical exertion, followed by periods of rest, with automatic changes in the depth and rate of breathing according to the amount of effort required. Resting on land is easy enough, you just have to stop. In water, it's a different matter. In water, you have to be conscious of your breathing and adjust the rate of your swimming stroke to suit the demands of your breathing rhythm. If you become tired in water, you can't just stop. You have to get yourself into a position where you can float with minimum effort while you rest and regain your breath. Floating in itself is a skill which has to be learned, but the key to safety in water is knowing how to control your breathing. Swimming is a rhythmic exercise, and part of the process of learning to swim safely is the development of a steady, regular, and efficient breathing rhythm. For each stroke, you have to learn the regular point at which you can hold your mouth or nose clear of the water long enough to breathe in. You cannot assume that such breathing controls will come naturally. They have to be learned. The best technique to ensure that you take an in-breath only when the breathing passages are clear of the water is to concentrate on breathing out whenever your face is immersed. But this raises another point. Just how much time do you need to take in sufficient oxygen? If you are swimming fast, or if you are trying to swim against the force of a current, you will need more air. But how do you achieve this if you can only breathe in at one specific point in the stroke? On land, there's no problem. If you exert yourself, you adjust the depth and rate of your breathing so that you take in more air. It's an automatic reaction to the extra work you're doing. In water, you have to adjust the rate of your stroke to suit the rhythm of your breathing. Even if you're physically fit, you can only afford to swim fast if your breathing control is well developed. The control of breathing is a fundamental skill, but allied to it is the control of balance. You may have perfect balance controls on land, but in water it's completely different. You have to compensate for the resistance and buoyancy of the water in every move you make. And if the water itself is moving, the problem is even greater. For a swimmer with inadequate balance control, it's very easy to get into difficulties. And if this happens, it becomes even more important that the reaction to breathe out when under the water has become a natural reflex. The life-preserving skill in this situation is the ability to keep calm and roll into a safe breathing position with the face out of the water. Security in the water is dependent on two basic skills: control of breathing and control of balance. In water, these are skills which have to be practiced and learned. Let's look more closely at breathing control. For the serious swimmer, it is a finely practiced element of the whole swimming stroke, brought to a peak of timing to give maximum efficiency. But the basic principles apply in just the same way to the beginner. In the simplest terms, we all learn something about breathing and the properties of liquids when we're young. We learn that it's physically impossible to breathe in and out at the same time. The two are quite separate actions. Through simple play activities, you can create an awareness of the properties of liquids even before the children are introduced to the water. When we're young, we also use the control necessary to avoid taking in liquids when we don't want them. In a shower, the water running down the face can enter the mouth, but it presents no threat. It can be held quite simply in the front of the mouth and expelled when necessary. Familiarity with water begins in the home. Here, a child can begin to experience the properties of water in a safe environment. The water in the bath can be controlled in temperature and depth, creating the ideal situation for a child to begin to practice the basic elements of breathing control. He can put his head in the water without fear, and it doesn't take much experimentation to discover that breathing out underwater is the best way to stop it going up his nose or into his mouth. Through this everyday contact with water, we learn not to inhale and choke on it, but always to blow out against it. In the bath, the water is shallow. There should be nothing frightening about it, and of course it can be controlled very easily. It is here in the home that a child can begin to gain a feeling of psychological security in water. The public swimming pool, on the other hand, is very much larger. The water is deep and there's nothing to hold on to if you're out in the middle. It's not unusual for it to be noisy and crowded, and to a child this can be a very intimidating experience. For this reason, the first few visits should be made under the most favourable conditions you can create. Many children will adjust quickly to the idea of swimming, but for those with less confidence, the early lessons should always be given with plenty of reassurance. The care you take in the first few introductions to the water will determine how willing each child will be to make that mental adjustment to the idea of entering such a large expanse of water. In the unfamiliar surroundings of your local pool, a good way of overcoming any apprehension is to occupy the children with activities which are familiar to them, like washing.
Big splash, surely, man. Big splash. Big one. Big one. Right, okay. Take your support. And swimmers, head forward and in.
Once safely in the pool, the swimmers are encouraged to dip their faces into the water while blowing out at the same time. All swimmers should be allowed to progress at their own pace, and while the aim is to achieve confidence in the water, watch out for over-enthusiasm, which can obscure your view of the swimmer's breathing techniques. This simple exercise also provides a basic introduction to the skills of balance control. The instructors provide only minimal support to encourage the children to maintain their own balance and control their movement through the water. The easiest way to teach a child to breathe out in the water is to make it fun. Blowing the plastic poached egg so that it flips over takes a bit of practice. You have to blow down on the rim like blowing on hot soup. This downwards action of blowing against the water is the basis of the principle we're trying to achieve, and it's also a good exercise in balance control. Again, don't let over-enthusiasm go too far. It's easy for swimmers to hyperventilate if they're over-breathing while not doing sufficient physical work. If a swimmer can blow into the water, it should be possible to whistle into it. These exercises form the first lessons in oral breathing. Whistling into the water is fun, but when you get bored of it, you can vary the exercise by using toy whistles and trumpets. Never be tempted to carry out any of these breathing practices for too long at a time without a break or change in the activity. A concentrated exercise should be followed either by one which is more relaxing or by a more physical type of game. Singing is an exercise for the whole group, and it rarely loses its appeal. Singing is simply a matter of controlled exhalation, and the children are encouraged in their own time to sing underwater. Moving round in a circle is also a useful practice for the control of vertical balance in the swirling water. When entirely familiar with the idea of breathing out underwater, the next stage is to try submerging completely. In this exercise, the children are encouraged to escape from the circle of instructors by ducking under their outstretched arms. Once again, a strong element of balance control is required if the exercise is performed correctly. Finding the confidence to submerge completely is a major step for all beginners. And while everyone should be encouraged to do so as early as possible, no one should feel under any pressure. If the idea of escaping from the circle is treated as a game, those who are less confident will soon lose their inhibitions. Some will take longer than others, and for those who are not quite ready, the instructors make it easy to cheat by allowing their arms to be lifted. The aim of this practice is to achieve a smooth, unhurried action, with the swimmer allowing a trickle of air to come out of the nose or mouth while remaining perfectly balanced in the water.
Right, blink, 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 and ready, in we go now.
The progression from oral breathing to nasal breathing should not be overlooked. Breathing out through the nose is a separate skill and a very important one for the protection of the sinuses. Nasal breathing requires more delicate control than oral breathing, and it should be perfected before the swimmer is allowed to go under the water for longer periods of time. In this exercise, the swimmer is encouraged to make a humming sound as he submerges, and if he is breathing out correctly, you should see a smooth stream of bubbles coming from the nose. Breathing out under the water is most easily controlled when the body is in a vertical position. Water can be kept out of the nose with only the slightest amount of pressure. Again, the best way to achieve this is to hum. In the prone position, there's no great problem either. The difficulty arises when the nose is not pointing downwards. In this position, you find that breathing out suddenly requires greater control, and you have to expel the air through the nose at a faster rate. With practice, this control can be developed to the point where the swimmer can move easily into one of the most important basic exercises for balance and breathing control, the complete somersault. In the middle of a somersault, the swimmer's nose is pointing upwards, making it very easy for water to enter the nose and sinus passages. To keep the water out at this point, you must be expelling air through your nose with sufficient force to oppose the pressure of the water. The same principle applies in a backward somersault, where the nose can be pointing upwards for even longer. The deeper you go, the harder it is. You have to start by breathing out lightly, then increase the pressure as you turn upside down. This way, you can make the most of the air supply stored in your lungs. With any somersault, the control of balance is just as important as that of breathing. For this blind swimmer, the control of balance is made even more difficult without the aid of sight, and the achievement is even greater for the fact that he has only limited movement on land as a result of chronic arthritis. In all exercises, the role of the supporters is only to support. The movement must be initiated and controlled by the swimmer at his own pace. The push and glide is mainly a prone balance exercise, but the recovery to a safe breathing position is through a roll in which the nose is disadvantaged. Again, a high level of control over the expulsion of a steady stream of air is vital. The position of the head in relation to the rest of the body is also critical. The head should be well down, with the chin towards the chest, throughout both the glide and the roll. The progress of all swimmers is highly dependent on the quality of teaching they receive from the earliest stages. Progress is made through exercises, which stretch them a little further each time. But exercises are useless without a caring and observant instructor. Each swimmer needs to feel confident in the water, and this is developed by giving reassurance and encouragement, and by never pushing them beyond their ability at any particular stage. We have to remember that it takes a sizable jump in mental adjustment to accept the idea of entering the foreign environment of water. In practice, the need for a swimmer to make this mental adjustment should be considered as important as the need to learn the skills of balance and breathing control. The three elements are inseparable. These swimmers are at a later stage of progress. They're able to keep their faces under for much longer, although they can come up earlier whenever they need. As always, it is important that breathing control exercises are not overdone. In this exercise, as the swimmers are trailed backwards, there's plenty of time to breathe naturally before the next forward movement. As an instructor, you must watch out for swimmers being tempted to hold their breath. They should be trailing a constant stream of bubbles from their nose or mouth whenever they're under the water. Breath holding creates tension, which is often shown up by the tendency to grip the hand of the instructor. The flat hands here indicate that the swimmer is totally happy. He has control of his breathing and balance, and the contact language through his hands is telling the instructor that he is mentally relaxed. As far as the different strokes are concerned, some require greater breathing control than others. The double-arm backstroke, or rowboat, is perhaps the easiest for the beginner. The face is out of the water at all times, even though the nose is disadvantaged in this position. But by keeping the arms wide and low, there is no splash to enter the airway. With leg action alone, again, there is no splash to interfere with safe breathing. And even though the whole body is being rotated around the spinal axis, as in all asymmetric strokes, the head remains stable, keeping the airway clear of the water. Perhaps the ultimate example of control over breathing, balance and mental adjustment is the twin tail, an exercise to test the swimmer's ability in all four balance positions: left side, prone, right side and supine. Each position can be practiced as a single exercise, but you should practice all positions equally to avoid creating a dominance. As always, strokes should be built around the swimmer's breathing ability so that the whole exercise is calm and relaxed. By excluding the use of the arms, there is no splash to disturb the swimmer's concentration on maintaining a regular breathing pattern. As the head is held in all possible positions, the twin tail is a particularly useful introduction to the front crawl, where rather than just turning the head out of the water to breathe, you should turn your whole body within the cycle of the stroke to roll into an easier breathing position. When the separate exercises have been mastered, all four can be put together in a sequence. A simple roll into each new position avoids any interruption in the stroke. The ideal is for a swimmer to be able to control body balance in any position and to be able to recover to a safe breathing position at will. Remember, with any prone stroke, where the body is facing downwards, the period of time within the cycle of the stroke when the face can be brought out of the water is quite short. The one thing you must do is breathe, so you must find your own breathing rhythm and regulate your arm action to suit your breathing requirements. If you try to fit your breathing into the stroke, you will lose your breathing control. The temptation to start competitive fitness training must be resisted until the stroke has been mastered sufficiently well to swim for hundreds of meters before finding any problems with breathing. Even for swimmers at high levels of competition, if their breathing is inefficient in any way, the whole stroke will suffer. We all know we have to learn to swim, but learning to swim means learning to float, learning to control our balance, learning to move in water, and learning to control our breathing. You can't enjoy doing something in which you have no skill, and it doesn't matter whether you're in the water for competition or recreation. Swimming must be an enjoyable activity if you're going to be successful at it. If swimmers are trained thoroughly in these basic skills from their first introduction to the water, then the result will be confidence, safety, enjoyment, and success.
At Glen Waverley Special School, all those concerned with the total well-being of the child consider aquatic activity an essential component in providing a balanced and rewarding program. After a period of water familiarisation, the children are grouped according to their ability in the water and total needs, taking age and personal relationships into consideration. A fundamental understanding of the conditions, their resultant effect on body shape and density, and these implications for body control in the water are absolutely essential in order to do this. Some of the conditions we encounter are hemiplegia. Notice the retraction and lesser developed left side. In water, the body rolls towards the affected side. Spastic diplegia. The arms are affected to a lesser extent than the legs. Hip flexion is apparent, giving her body a triangular shape. This swimmer has learnt, and is in complete control of any instability along her longitudinal axis.
Can you stand up now, Angie? Go, Angie, go.
This body shape will cause difficulties with breathing when in prone. Muscular dystrophy. These boys have reached a point where movement on land is extremely limited. However, changes in muscle tissue give them extreme buoyancy, and in water they can manipulate their rotation to change body position. Spina bifida. The lower limbs are affected to varying degrees, resulting in placidity and high-floating legs. Spastic quadriplegia. All four limbs are extensively involved. The body is extremely unstable along the longitudinal axis. The following children exhibit varying degrees of athetosis. Athetosis is characterized by the involuntary movement and constant alteration in body shape. This child has trouble breaking up her total movement patterns. In an attempt to stabilize herself and keep her weight forward, she maintains her head and trunk in flexion. When seated on a mobile stool, the normal righting and equilibrium reactions are not present. In her frustrated attempts to communicate, notice the overshooting and lack of grading of movement for a specific task. This child is unable to move independently. Involuntary movements are apparent in the hands and feet. Note the lack of mouth closure. In water, the constant alteration in body shape is apparent. An essential part of our total pool program occurs in the change room.
How are you going to get up? You're going to stand up and put it over your feet. Just a minute. Bend your knees up underneath you. Right. Pull it right down.
Entry for children in the following group is from a seated position at the pool side. Activities requiring a great deal of movement are particularly useful in the early part of the program and may flow into a controlled movement stage. Some preparatory seaweed, using the weight of the water, may aid in damping down excess movement and giving a feeling of stillness. For these children, where there is too much movement, stability is extremely difficult. Here we are working in a vertical position. Water depth is critical with these children. Disengagement is essential if the child is to achieve independence. Much of the lesson is specific and hard work for the swimmers. A lighter tone is added to the session by introducing games and activities where teaching points are subtle. A point of fixation is used to encourage the arms forward and give some added stability to the upper trunk and shoulder girdle, to allow the child more control as they take the head near the water in an attempt to blow. To extend the blowing activity, a rhythmic sequence demands control of grading of the head movement. All swimmers must learn to change their body position. These children do take a long time to learn, but their reward in their own achievements is a high motivator for swimmer and instructor alike. We must give them repeated opportunity to practice, as they are unable to practice by independent repetition as most children do. Time to achieve is essential. The weakness in the neck flexors is apparent in supine, and this will affect total body position. Instability along the long axis is apparent due to the short radius and constant alteration to body shape. Appreciation of movement around this axis is critical to maintaining a balanced supine position. Teaching of lateral rotation should be progressive, from a small, controlled movement then with some body displacement, and finally a complete rotation. Turbulence gives the child experience in moving water, which in turn causes natural body rotation. Movement for propulsion requires careful analysis. Here it will be with lower limbs. Towing on turbulence will lead on to a natural stroking method for the athetoid. Propulsion may be ineffective in the early stages, hence the turbulence may assist with its development. A number of these children with athetosis tend to be long and thin, and hence they are not natural floaters or may float low in the water. Involuntary movement may cause a wash over their faces, making them unhappy about remaining in the supine position. Here, our swimmer has overcome extreme fear, and with recent increases in confidence and her own ability, she has chosen to work in prone. Considerable emphasis is being placed on her ability to change from supine to prone and reverse. This is an advanced and extremely complex skill requiring coordination of body position and eventually total breath control.
Forward. Forward. Good.
The movement competency, which can be achieved and which this child expresses, is intrinsically rewarding, aesthetically pleasing and exhilarating for all concerned.
Straight over.